So thanks so much, everyone, for coming. Welcome to FE 2023. Yeah, really nice to have you all. Recognize some faces from last year. We have a lot of loyal FE followers, many of which have been coming year after year. So want to thank you all. And yeah, really excited for this event tonight. Just a quick summary of what we have going forward. After this event, we'll have 14 more films over the next few days, a couple more events here, a couple events at 320 York Street. We have posters around outside where you can find information about that. But to start it off tonight, we have this is Extrapolations, so it's a show that recently premiered Apple TV. We have Dorothy Fortenberry here, executive producer, and Tony Leiserowitz will be moderating, and he'll do some introductions of our remote panelists as well. So this is the first major scripted series about climate change, where climate change is centered as a main character. The conversation, so Tony is an expert here on public climate change and environmental beliefs, attitudes, policy preferences, and behavior, and the psychological, cultural, and political factors that shape them. He conducts research at the global, national, and local scales, including many surveys of the American public. As I mentioned, he'll be joined by co-showrunner, executive producer, and writer of Extrapolations, Dorothy Fortenberry, and two commentators on scripted TV films, Influence on Environmental Action, Emily Corrin and Anna Jane Joyner. So some logistics first. This is a hybrid event, so we have hundreds joining us virtually. For those of you joining online, the chat is closed. Please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen and vote for your favorite questions. We'll make a recording of this conversation available on the website, send a link to everyone who's registered. So please help me welcome Tony and Dorothy and our guests tuning in remotely.
Well, again, welcome everybody to FE 2023. It's such a great thing to see this back in person, back live. It's been such a great event. Students have put this particular film festival together for years now, and it's really an incredible testament. So thank you to the students. They're just getting started, but this is going to be a great show. And then welcome to our panel, Climate Change and the Big Screen. So I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists. First is Dorothy Fortenberry. She's a screenwriter, playwright, and an essayist. She's the co-showrunner, executive producer, and a writer on the Apple TV newly released scripted series Extrapolations, which we'll see a bit of later. As a television writer and producer, she has worked on The 100 and The Handmaid's Tale, for which she received multiple Emmy nominations, the PGA Award, and 2 WGA Awards. She currently has several television projects in development, and she promises that not all of them are apocalyptic. Her plays include Partners, Species Native to California, and The Lotus Paradox. Dorothy is also a Yale alum, so welcome her home. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Emily Corrin. Wave at us, Emily. Thank you, there you are. She's a science communicator at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at Stanford, where she adapts entertainment education strategies for health promotion and social change to create more effective climate communication. She has worked in science communication for 15 years, contributing to collections at the National Institution's Museum of Natural History and developing educational content for children's films. Over the last 6 years, her work has led to new narrative frameworks at the national level, connecting community-led experiences to federal, local, and nonprofit programs for climate change communication. Welcome, Emily.
Nice to be here. Thank you, Tony.
And then I'd like to welcome an old friend, Anna Jane Joyner, who's a climate story consultant and the founder and director of Good Energy. With over 15 years of experience in climate communications, she's driven by a passion for storytelling, that's for sure, and helping people find courage in the face of climate change. Anna Jane has worked to establish bridges between artists, musicians, faith communities, Southerners, young audiences, and the climate movement. As a strategist at the intersection of climate and entertainment, she produced film and music videos and organized over 300 global partners around a youth mobilization campaign for the 2015 Paris Climate Summit. Her work has been featured by Rolling Stone, Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, Glamour, Deadline, CNN, the Associated Press, the New York Times, and more. I'll also just say that Fast Company just published an article yesterday featuring all 4 of the panelists. So go check it out if you want to learn more. So welcome, Anna.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
All right, let's jump into today's event. So we're going to start with an intro to Extrapolations, this brand new scripted series. And we really want to explore the power of storytelling. So let's start with Dorothy. Could you share us a little bit more about the premise of Extrapolations? Like, why is it called Extrapolations? And how did the creative team construct this vision of the near future?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's called Extrapolations because in it we are extrapolating what will happen in an imagined near future. So we begin in 2037. And the main imaginative question that we structured the series around was, what if we just keep on kind of going the way we're going? And if you think about climate storytelling, often there is a sort of like, what if everything is extremely terrible and it's the worst case scenario? And we made the choice that there are already some narratives that do that. And we wanted to do something else, which is it can be very bad without being the absolute end of all life on Earth. And what does it feel like to live through disruption and change and loss and innovation and action and decision-making in a near future where our, carbon ppm sort of continues on the current trajectory, and we end the century between like 2.5 and 3 degrees. What does that look like? What does that feel like? So it's 8 episodes. They are interconnected. So I will say it's not a pure anthology where you can kind of watch in any order, but it's also not like a show where you tune in every week and you see the same people in the same locations. So we have the connections between episodes vary depending on what the episodes are. So sometimes it's characters, sometimes it's locations, sometimes it's day and time, but it's told over 8 episodes spanning from 2037 to 2070.
And then can you say just a little bit about how you try to build or root the storylines in the science itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I joined the project, Scott Burns, who created the show, convened a writer's room, and he invited scientists and climate journalists and people to just talk about their research and what they had learned. And then by the time I showed up, we had some of that information, and then we went out. We had at one point several full-time researchers who were on staff. So anytime anybody had a question about anything, they could ask one of our researchers to find out more about it. And we really tried to build out a timeline that stretched from 2020, when we were imagining the show, all the way to 2070, kind of imagining like, okay, what does the world look like? What does it feel like? What is the sea level like? What's the ocean acidification level like? What is this doing to people's daily lives as we stretched on through time?
So just for those who don't know, Scott Burns was also involved in the creation of Inconvenient Truth. And he also was, I believe, the screenwriter for a wonderful film called Contagion, which basically predicted COVID like insanely well, years before COVID happened. So yeah, someone who takes this business very seriously. Okay, so can we see a teaser?
Yeah, we should watch the trailer.
Human history is the story of one terrible catastrophe after another.
I, for once, would love to wake up magically in a better world.
What makes you think the world's going to get better?
Today, people get their energy from the sun. Humans have set foot on Mars. Cancer has been defeated. And yet, for every question answered, another one appears.
Here's what you need to know about global warmings. Doesn't matter. At the end of the century, we'll be dead. We'll have to miss it. But we'll be smiling in gold-plated coffins. This is not the life that I envisioned it to be.
A man whose house is on fire is incredibly easy to negotiate with.
We cannot give up and go home for one simple reason. We already are home. This is our only home.
I think it helps to look at climate change like a bear. The whole planet's been wrestling with the bear for decades. So far, the bear's been kicking our ass.
What if we were able to develop technology that would allow us to survive, maybe even thrive?
You don't know what's going to happen.
It won't go the way you want. It never does.
I remember being happy.
But what about now? Are you happy now? Are we bad people? Stop being angry about the past. The future is now.
Miami is dangerous. Your mother's moving with her sister in Chicago.
Thought you hated your sister.
It's too hot out to hate people these days, Marshall.
All right, thank you. So one other thing I want to just really emphasize as part of this is it's not just trying to extrapolate climate science and where the world, what the world looks like in a warming conditions under where we're currently headed, but it's also an attempt to extrapolate a lot of the other trends, our technological trends, our innovation. What will that world look like? And I think that's a really interesting mixture of both social innovation and in some ways world getting better. At the same time, the world is getting worse. Which unfortunately does describe our current moment pretty well. So I want to bring it back to the whole panel and just see, first of all, do Anna or Emily have any quick reactions to what you've seen of the show, whether it's just this trailer or anything else? Let me say, Anna, do you have any immediate thoughts?
I mean, I just think it's so remarkable that we now have a television show where climate is a primary driver of the plot and the characters' lives, and then is in itself a character. It's it's a really monumental moment and in the in the climate movement and in our history. So thank you, Dorothy and Scott Burns, for spearheading this really incredible moment. And also I have seen a lot of the show, and I really love how it brings these huge issues like biodiversity and health impacts and all kinds of mental health impacts, and really gives puts stories to them and makes it emotionally really resonant. So I'm super excited, and I'm very grateful to Dorothy and the whole team.
I love that framing. This is a historic moment. It's the first scripted television show, hopefully not the last. It won't be the last, because unfortunately this is going to be very real for all of our lives. Emily, quick reactions from you.
What struck me about the show was how visceral the health impacts felt. I love how, I know we're going to get into the questions in a minute about the role storytelling plays, but Dorothy, I think that your team did a really beautiful job making even some of the current health impacts that people are facing, like air quality and heat impacts, feel real. I think that was thank you for those visualizations.
Well, let's actually get to know our panelists a little better. And Dorothy, I'm going to come back to you. This is a hard issue. So what was your own personal journey? What led you to say, I'm going to work on this?
Oh man. I mean, I have been interested in, concerned about, aware of climate change probably as far back as I can remember, certainly since, elementary school. But it hadn't been something that I had necessarily brought into my work until maybe like the last 10 years or so. I was working on a play, The Lotus Paradox, which one of the characters is a climate researcher. So climate change is a big part of the story in that play. And then I had been trying to, in various ways, get climate change into all the TV shows I was working on, sort of in any possible way, with varying degrees of success. And one of the things I was really I enjoyed and I felt really grateful to be able to do is the showrunner for The Handmaid's Tale, Bruce Miller, was very open to this question. And in The Handmaid's Tale, it's written in 1986, there's a catastrophic environmental effect, which creates a fertility crisis, which then, leads to all of the various events of The Handmaid's Tale, and you end up with everybody in a bonnet, but it starts with an environmental crisis. And when we were working on the show in 2016, he really wanted to bring it up to the present day. And one of the things we said was, well, okay, if it's the present day, it's probably not like a nuclear weapon, it's probably a climate crisis. And I think to anybody sort of looking at, the worldwide sperm collapse, like the idea that climate could, have an impact on fertility is not super far-fetched. So in that show, climate change was very much a sort of a background character. And we worked to have, electric vehicles and solar panels. And there's very subtle conversation around environmental and climate issues in that show, which I really enjoyed being a part of. And I would always put it in my scripts all the time, anywhere I could. And then I happened to just end up in this group of people who were having this conversation. Anna Jane was one of them about climate storytelling. I ended up on a panel with Scott where we were talking about climate change on TV. And I was just really loud. And I kept talking about all the things I thought were bad about climate change. I was like, and it shouldn't do this, and it shouldn't do this, and it has to do this, and I hate it when it does this. And I just was really upset. And then afterwards he called me and he was like, well, I'm making this show about climate change. Do you want to come run it with me? You seem to have a lot of opinions. Which I feel like I shouldn't take too seriously as a way to get a job, because I feel like most times it won't turn out like that. But luckily that time it did. So my journey with this was that I might be the only person on the show whose mental health improved over production, because I had already been reading every article. I had been paying attention to it. I was really deeply invested in it as an issue and really tracking what was happening, politically. And, I don't know if you guys were around in the, 2017, 18, 19, it was not like the greatest time for climate stuff. And I was paying a ton of attention and I was feeling very sad. And so getting a chance to work on this show actually meant going to work every day and using all the articles I had read. So it wasn't just like I'm reading them alone at my desk on my lunch break, but it was actually coming and being like, hey, did you see this? This glacier is going to fall even sooner than we thought. Hey, let's put it in the episode. There's something I could do about it. I wasn't like happy about the glacier, but it felt like there was something I could do. There was somewhere I could take that information. It felt actionable. So I actually slept much better at night working on extrapolations than I did beforehand.
Well, let's then bring this to the larger picture and really coming back to the key theme of this meeting here or this event, climate change on the big screen. So one phenomenon that we found in our research is what we call the climate change spiral of silence, that many people don't talk about climate change. In fact, only 8% of Americans say that they hear other people talking about climate change even once a week, which is not that often. And so we are in a culture where this just seems to be one of those big existential challenges that we don't actually talk that much about. And talk is not a substitute for action, but it is a necessary condition for action because we talk about the things that are important. And yet narrative and culture and storytelling can be one of the main ways that we break those kinds of silences. Film in particular is an interesting one. Michael Svoboda at our own Yale Climate Connections actually did an analysis of films and found only one mentioning climate change in the 1970s, For those who are a bit older, you may remember Soylent Green and the famous last line of that movie. There were 7 in the 1990s, including The Fire Next Time, Waterworld, Twister, and then more than 60 since The Day After Tomorrow, which was really a kind of a watershed mark, if I can use that unironically, including other major movies like Snowpiercer, Mad Max, Fury Road, Avengers, Infinity War, the Avengers. These themes was really big in that. Yet, the Lear Center, USC released a study last year finding that only 3% of the more than 37,000 film and TV scripts from 2016 through 2020 included even a mention of climate change. So I want to really just raise this question. How do we break the spiral of silence in American society? And what's the unique role and power of storytelling in film and TV in social change? And actually, I want to take that first to Emily, because I want you to just quickly explain what is entertainment education and how does it actually work to break these kinds of spirals of silence on lots of issues.
So entertainment education is a research-based methodology that's been used for over 40 years to affect pro-social behavioral changes in a variety of public health fields. It's been used globally in vaccine campaigns, reproductive health campaigns, literacy. It's got a long storied history for how it started. It started with Miguel Sabito introducing sort of pro-social themes to telenovelas. So we've, from a research perspective, figured out how you can use formative research to inform behavior change campaigns, of which the sort of the top of the iceberg really is the television component. It's really sort of a much more transmedia impact. And I think that's where some of the Action for Climate Empowerment work would come, Tony, because, you know, it's not just the role of television, but how we interconnect those ideas across many different kinds of institutions, including journalism and both formal and informal science education initiatives. And so I think that storytelling has a really unique role in film and media because of exactly what we were talking about before, with how visceral those images that it creates contribute to the overall concept of science, you know, of climate change communication. And so I feel like that our real impact is how we can work together as a team across all of the different media types to create a more comprehensive social narrative to impact, you know, how we frame and discuss climate change.
Yeah, that's such a great example. And I'm glad you brought up Miguel Sabito. He was a producer of, at the time, the most popular soap opera on Mexican television. And they wrote into the script a grandfather who wanted to read his grandson a bedtime story, but he was illiterate. So he couldn't read his son to sleep, or his grandson to sleep. So in the course of the next several episodes, he enrolls in literacy classes, learning how to read. And, you know, of course, struggles, goes through the difficulties and challenges of done it, but the story arc ends with him reading his grandson a bedtime story to bed. Okay, lovely. Enrollment in literacy classes jumped 1,000%. And he went, wow. And it changed his life. And he devoted himself to using telenovelas and soap operas and this narrative form to effectuate social change. And it's, as she said, it's been used very effectively. It's one of the best forms of mass social change I'm aware of in the world. So yeah, really incredible. Lots of lessons to be learned from that. Anna, please jump into this and tell us what you're doing and how you're trying to help get these stories going and break the spiral of silence.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything that Emily and Dorothy just said. And this idea that you have talked about, or this research that you've done on the climate silence that is, you know, way too prevalent in this country, is a big part of our strategic driver at Good Energy. Just this idea that if we see characters that we feel connected to, even just mention climate change, let alone like wrapping it into an actual story, then it validates the audience and makes them feel seen, that it's okay for them to talk about it, or even just to be worried about it and think about it. Because I think that there's there's a big mental health problem around climate change, and feeling isolated and alienated definitely contributes to that. So that's something that is incredibly valuable to me about storytelling and television and film in particular, is this ability to create connection and make audiences feel less alone, and let alone like the actual stories themselves, and how connecting these huge issues to characters in a compelling narrative can just have all kinds of really important psychological effects, you know, inspiring courage, showing us solutions, showing us where we don't want to go, you know, really creating empathy and compassion. And so I think that for me, as coming out of climate communication strategy, it was just you know, this emphasis on storytelling and integrating climate into entertainment was just an area we needed to invest in more as a movement. And so it's been a real honor of my career and just a lot of fun. Like, as Dorothy was saying, if you have to work on climate change and if you're thinking about it all the time, that working on creativity and storytelling and really imagining, you know, stories and how this plays out is the best way I've come to processing all of these really big things that we're experiencing. Yeah, so Good Energy, really our goal is just to support screenwriters in integrating climate on screen, everything from passing mentions to full shows and films where climate is a big part of the story.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, go ahead.
I just was going to say, I think it's important though to just note that, like, it's not just that people who want to talk about climate change have been ineffective. It's that people who want people to not talk about climate change have been incredibly effective. Like, there's not a spiral of silence because, like, we just forgot to talk about climate change. There was like a massive, extremely expensive, multi-decade long campaign to specifically make climate change a controversial, hot button issue that, like, nobody knows, and people framed it on media, in television, in front of all of our faces, as a question of belief. And so the question became, do you believe in climate change, which is inherently sort of like polarizing and spiritual, and like, now we're talking about like, well, what do I believe in? Like, that's, you know, it was a really, really brilliant, wonderful climate storytelling campaign. It was just done by people who wanted to prolong the oil and gas industry. Like, we've lived through a really successful climate communications campaign already. We are now dealing with the outcome of an extremely successful climate communications campaign. It's just, that's who did it. And they did it really well. And they succeeded for a really long time.
And just jumping off that quickly, the oil and gas industry has had people in Hollywood since the 1940s. There was a narrative film that came out in 1948 that was paid for by the oil industry to really tell this like beautiful story about a little boy and his pet raccoon, but it really was, the purpose was celebrating the oil industry and changing public opinion on it. So this strategy has been employed by the opponents for many decades.
Yeah, and all the HGTV people put in gas stoves in homes because they're paid by the gas companies to put gas stoves. Like every home renovation project is, you know, a pro gas stove propaganda piece. So anyway, I feel like we have to not understand ourselves as operating in like a barren landscape of no terrain, but operating in a terrain that has been created and shaped by people who got there first and got there better. And so now we're having to go like, okay, there's been one climate narrative we've received. Let's make a different one.
Okay, we could get, we're just getting started here. Okay, so there are a number of themes there, especially Anna's point about connecting to really large issues, and I think that sets up our next clip. So if you could please introduce that.
Absolutely. So this is from episode 2, and in it you see a scientist named Dr. Rebecca Shearer, who's played by Sienna Miller, and her job is studying the last of different species before they go extinct. So she travels the world and she tries to get genetic and behavioral information about them so that it can be saved in a vault by a sort of DNA and behavioral science company in the hopes that one day these animals can be brought back. So when we meet her, she's in the middle of doing her research, which is currently about a humpback whale.
One important little piece, the technology has gotten to the point where we can actually translate human language to whale and back. So that she's
And-
actually involved in a conversation.
And that's not that far-fetched. There's a
It's
whole
not that far-
documentary on whale communication.
Yeah, yeah,
I can show you.
And
Want to
we-
watch the
we
documentary on
didn't
whale
actually
communication?
go in this, but like that's a whole nother dimension of this too. So it's just to say, again, one of these kind of extrapolation
Yes.
pieces. So with that, if we could watch the clip.
This is a secured link for Menagerie 2100. Rebecca Shearer, archivist for HW1998F. Everything that follows in the communications interface is the property of Menagerie 2100. August 18, 2046. 3, 2, 1. If you are receiving this, please respond. If you can still hear me, please respond.
I heard another last night. Where is he?
If there is a male out there, I will help you find him.
I want to be a mother again. In this place. In this now.
Is there enough food for that?
If he is here, then there must be enough. There must be.
Add sound to vocabulary interface.
Why do you make my sounds after all this time?
I have watched your kind all my life. I was curious about you. You know what curious is? Play archive session 008. Where did you hear the last male?
He was not far from here. We found each other at the bottom of the sky. He was different from this one.
What happened to him?
It was a day. The sky was close. The ones that were food for us were gone. So we looked in new places. He did not see what hit him from above. It put holes in him, and he fell away. All the way down. He is still there. I see him as he changes. Where is this new male? I cannot find him.
Okay. I'd like to speak to you.
Oh, Rebecca, I'm a little busy right now.
This is important.
I can come back.
You didn't just lie to me. You lied to her.
She's going extinct either way. At least this way we can bring her back when we fix things.
First, we turn them into candles and corsets, and then we run them over with ships and fill their bellies with plastic bags, and yet still, somehow, a few survive. Until the carbon dioxide turns the ocean into acid, and the animals she eats can't even form bones, and so now when there is only one left, you have to lie to her.
And if you had told her all that at the beginning, how eager would she be to tell you her life story? Or what if you had told her that the recordings we're making will replace the information imparted from an adult to a juvenile in the wild, because there will be no wild? Would that be honest enough for you? Bilton pays more because we're the ones who have an exit interview with a humpback whale. That's a win.
If people knew what we were doing, if the press got a hold of this.
And how would that happen? Hendricks can finish up here. We need you to head to Alaska. There's a species of wolf up there.
What does that mean, finish
called
up?
the
What's he gonna
Alexander
say to her?
archipelago wolf.
Is he trying to get her to beach herself so tomorrow's zoo won't have a humpback? Is that what he's doing?
If you'll excuse me, I have a meeting.
Okay. So one of the things that this particular episode, this is episode number 2, and I do recommend it, is it's trying to intersect 2 of the major environmental challenges that we're living through. One, of course, is climate change, but the other is the biodiversity extinction. As many of you know, we're living through the 6th great extinction event, and this one's human caused. And, you know, these are massive global problems, but they're really hard to get one's head around, right? It's far beyond the personal experience of any human being. And we usually describe and talk about these challenges in these abstractions, like millions of species going extinct, or parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, or 1.5 degrees centigrade, which don't even come close to capturing what this is actually all about. So this particular episode intersects these 2 global crises, and it tries to help us understand how climate change is both hastening extinction, is hastening extinction through individual and emotional stories. So now the question to the panel here is, how can storytelling, and this is a good example of it, help people mentally and emotionally understand what is at stake in these massive global problems in a way that we can actually comprehend?
Yeah, and I'll just, there's some spoilers in that one, so sorry. Please still watch the episode. But I'll say that Scott wrote this episode and he directed it, so I can brag about him because it's not mine. And what he did is he really paralleled the life of Rebecca Shearer with the life of this whale that she meets. And so they end up kind of becoming friends on parallel journeys. Rebecca has a complicated relationship with her mom, and she's sort of working through that. She also has a son who has a climate related health condition. He was exposed to very high temperatures when she was pregnant, and he has a heart condition as a result of that. So the whale mom has lost her whale offspring, and she has lost her whale partner. And Rebecca has lost her mother, she has lost her husband, and she is very concerned about the health of her child. And so what Scott did was try to have these parallel relationships to make us understand, okay, we can imagine a woman who has had the loss of a parent or a spouse, or who has an ill child, by bringing her into relationship with the whale. We're trying to extend sort of our imaginative empathy to, okay, what would it be like to be the last whale? You know, that whale will not have human consciousness. You know, that whale may not be able to understand that they are the last whale, but they'll still have the desire to find a partner, have a child. And the episodes of the event are structured around trying to really tell those stories in parallel.
And that really is getting at the underlying principle here, is that you can talk about an abstract issue like climate change or biodiversity extinction, but it tends to hit human beings the most powerfully if you can boil it down to character.
Yeah.
You know, the interaction of a particular story of a particular person, in this case, interacting with another mother, albeit from another species. So that's one of our challenges in communication around these issues more broadly, is how do we take these giant issues and help translate them in story form in a way that everyday people can just hear it and immediately not just understand it, but feel it. Okay. And I think that's at least one of the things that's being tried here. So the other thing that I want to bring up here is, this episode, as you just mentioned, really is helping to illustrate the grief this scientist character is feeling within her own life, from the loss of her mother, her husband, the vulnerability of her son, and just the work she does with studying species that are going extinct. So Anna and Emily, I'm wondering if you could just comment briefly on why is it important for film and television to show people grappling with grief and other emotions around climate change? Because I will just say most of our discourse in these issues is, and I'm speaking from the School of the Environment, very academic, very scientific, very analytic. We tend not to focus on the emotional dimensions of this, which clearly are having huge consequences for people as they come to grips with the reality of these issues. So perhaps Anna, you could start first.
Yeah, it's huge. It's one of the main reasons that I'm so passionate about storytelling is the power of stories to help us process these difficult emotions that come with, with living through this moment in time. And, researchers think that we started telling stories, like humans started telling stories to be able to grapple with and navigate the hard parts of being alive. So death and loss and change. And that is till this day, what stories are, really beautifully do is help us they call it like an emotional container. Like they give us a way of looking at these difficult emotions that can just feel overwhelming through the lens of a particular character and story. They actually think that that's why Hamlet was so successful when it came out. They didn't think it was going to be successful because it was a really dark story, but it's huge and it remains like a really popular story today. But it's because the audience walked through their own grief through the character of Hamlet. And I do think that those stories, there's this kind of mythology that climate stories should only be hopeful and only show solutions. And yes, we do need more of those stories, but we also need stories that help us walk through these hard parts of living in this moment.
Yeah, great. Emily, what would you add?
Yeah, so certainly there is a role for empathy. But also I think that there's a place where we can make those transitional characters, starting with feelings of anxiety or grief and moving towards agency, both individual and collective agency. And I think that that's where we can get into the, Anna Jane, where you were talking about stories of solutions and people taking action. And I think that you can show the narrative transition through the characters, starting in one place and moving towards, I want to say, collective agency. And maybe not everybody knows what agency is. It's the ability to bring about an intended effect. It's a fundamental aspect of human functioning, originally brought up by social psychologist Al Bandura as part of his social cognitive theory.
Yeah, and I think it's, just to add on that quickly, it's really a foundational part of agency and taking action is feeling seen and being able to walk through, emotions that could otherwise shut us down.
Yeah, and just to not to spoil the episode completely, but the character does end up making sort of a bold and risky choice at the end and taking sort of agency. And I think our hope is we go with her through this grief process and all of these different feelings. We see her sad, we see her in that last scene very angry, yelling at her supervisor, but ultimately ends up making a choice. And I think that it's really right what you were saying, Emily, and something we tried to have all our characters do is to constantly be in a position where they can take action, and the choices they can make are dependent on their circumstances and what they have available to them, but everybody can make some sort of choice, and that choice is often a choice of connection. It's a choice that she doesn't make entirely alone. She makes it with her son. And so there's the twin pillars of this is something that we do together, and this is something that we have the ability to do really mattered for us in making the show.
All right, so let's now turn to our third clip.
Okay.
Could you set us up with that?
Yes, so this is episode 3, and this episode is set in Miami in 2046, and it's the story of a synagogue that in this Miami not all of the neighborhoods can survive due to sea level rise. And so the synagogue is tasked with having to sort of fight for its survival and make a case to the government that it should survive. And while the rabbi is navigating that, there's also a young woman who is having her bat mitzvah training. And so she is going through bat mitzvah education at the same time as the rabbi is trying to preserve the synagogue. So that's sort of the setup.
Okay. Yes. Let's go.
You say something, Rabbi?
Yeah, just praying.
There's a prayer for this?
There's a prayer for everything, Sophie. So yes, there is a prayer to save the synagogue from falling into the ocean.
Rabbi Zucker.
Hey. Kids. Nice touch, Reverend.
Thank you so much, Reverend. That was beautiful. Just the two of you? No musicians? Holograms? VR? AR? Baked goods?
It's just us. A 100 years ago, construction began on Temple Israel. It was built out of hope, out of faith. It was built by Holocaust survivors who came to South Florida and declared with every brick, "This is our home, and we belong." I know that not every building can be saved, and so I stand before you today in hopes that the Department of Sea Level Mitigation will look favorably upon our application for protection. As a person who believes there is power in physical presence, I'm grateful to stand before you today.
Let us all dip the parsley in salt water twice.
Hard to forget the ocean. We're the ones getting dipped 4 days this week.
There's another question.
I thought there were 3.
And the book says there's 4. That's why they call them the 4 questions, Gabriella.
Don't be a jerk, Dad.
He was not being a jerk. He was teaching her.
When you use someone's name in every sentence, Mom, then, Mom, you're being a jerk.
Let's hear the 4th question, Alana. I'm listening.
On all other nights, we eat our meals in any manner. Why on this night do we sit around the table in a reclining position?
Do you want to take that one?
Oh, yeah. This question goes back to ancient Rome, when it was the custom for rich people to eat while lying on a couch, leaning on one elbow as slaves and servants fed them. Our people thought of this relaxed type of eating as a sign of freedom and prosperity. So we leaned to one side, eating at the Seder, as a reminder of how it was when our people longed for freedom.
I refuse to recline.
Why is that, honey? What?
Because there are many people right here in Miami that are working for wages that keep them below the poverty level so other people could play golf.
And other people work their asses off to provide for their daughters and parents and ex-wives, and yet are made to feel bad about it in their own homes night after night for simply having the unmitigated gall to succeed in life.
I have another question.
There are only 4 questions. You nailed them. Now we eat.
I will ask my question. Why is God doing this to us? That is my question.
Doing what? What is God doing?
Are you kidding me, Dad? Do you even see what's happening around you?
Alana.
Alana, honey.
No.
Alana, I love what you said about the people of Miami. I love your empathy.
You glad you had a son?
Oh.
Yeah?
Alana Goldblatt.
Look at the temperature. It's not even the middle of the century and we're already past 1.8 degrees. Hurricane season used to start in August. Now it starts in April. And the Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica, if God breaks that off, sea level will be going up.
And God is doing that.
Isn't it God's ice shelf?
Okay, so is your question, why is God doing this? Yeah, or is it, why isn't God stopping this? But maybe the better question is, why aren't we stopping it? Right? Yes, maybe it's our glacier too.
Okay. Do you have an answer for that?
The sage Alana Goldblatt once said, maybe it's because humans suck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what this episode does, among other things, is it raises this question of eco-anxiety, which is, of course, a phenomenon that we're documenting is certainly out there and affecting a number of people as they come to grips with this. Not all people, but I would just say it is clearly an issue that we're going to see more and more of, especially as people experience more of the direct trauma of these events. Not just the foreboding of that what might happen, but what is happening. So here I want to come back to storytelling of Hollywood has often depicted climate change either as a disaster where everything eventually returns to normal. And here's where a movie like Twister comes in, right? Lots of damage from tornadoes, but eventually life goes back to normal. Or catastrophic and apocalyptic, I think here like The Day After Tomorrow, where like the world is never again the same. To dystopic, where basically the setting is now after an apocalypse and it's people trying to scratch out a living out of what remains, Hunger Games being just one major example of that. And of course, the Extrapolations is trying to do something different. It's trying to actually take us back to that middle place before the apocalypse, to show us living through the difficult point where we still have choices to make. And so I really want to ask, how can storytelling depict the reality of the crisis, like clear-eyed, but still leave still leave room for hope and courage, so viewers don't become overwhelmed or worse, fatalistic about climate change? So Dorothy, could you comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly what we're trying to do, especially in this particular episode. We have this character, Alana, who is grappling, she's 13, and she feels really overwhelmed. And I think she feels like her own family is complicit, and is not helping to do anything that's making anything any better. And I think she feels really theologically curious as to basically where God is in all of this, and wondering if humanity is being punished for its sins. And I think her journey over the course of the episode really tries to show somebody, again, moving from a place where there's a lot of fear and anxiety to being able to make a connection, being able to find, starting with a small choice, but branching outwards, something that she can do. And meanwhile, the rabbi's journey is, I think, one where he ends up doing some things that I think he later regrets in this effort to save the temple, which is a noble effort. But I think he also undergoes a bit of a conversion and a change and an opening of his eyes. So I think this is an episode, it's probably one of our most comedic episodes. And that was really important to have, not just levity because it's fun and it makes it fun to watch, but also because people are always telling jokes. People will tell jokes in climate change insofar as we are in climate change and we are still telling jokes right now, that it's going to keep going. So I think it makes it feel more human if you have people who can be, funny, and watching it, maybe it reminds you of people something you've lived through. So I think our main goals with this particular episode were really to live in that journey through eco-anxiety and take it to a place where it gets a little better. And then also to have a tone that's not necessarily so dire, even as we're talking about very dark things.
So Anna, you've written a whole playbook for Hollywood, the Good Energy Playbook, with advice and tips for writers. And I know this is an important theme that you try to really help them better understand of how do we tell these kinds of stories that leave room for hope and courage. Could you speak to some of your recommendations?
Yeah, I should. It wasn't just me. I had three incredible co-writers, two of which were screenwriters, TV writers, and also an enormous amount of advisors who gave us wisdom. So, but I mean, yeah, I think the big focus of the playbook was we do a lot of qualitative research. So we interviewed over 100 TV and film writers, and all of those insights went into building the content around the playbook. Dorothy was one of them, continues to give us some great wisdom and advice. But a big finding that we did through that research is that writers were equating climate stories with apocalypse stories. So like in their mental map, if you said climate story, they only thought of apocalypse stories. And so the purpose of the playbook was really just to broaden that menu of possibilities and show that there are so many captivating and entertaining ways that you can bring climate into your story that isn't just apocalyptic. And we did that through character profiles, fiction and otherwise. We did that through all kinds of great content, through case studies like Handmaid's Tale. We'll be adding extrapolation shortly. So yeah, that was the major purpose, but a big one for me, and I think that just really resonated, which really came from discussions around with comedy writers. They were, if you're a TV comedy writer, basically your hero is an anti-hero, so they're deeply flawed, and it's not like a movie where you go on a journey and get better and learn things. Like you're just always deeply flawed, and so they were like, if we have our characters who really care about climate change or doing something about climate change, but they are deeply flawed, is that like actually hurtful to the climate change and the climate movement? And we worked with Dr. Brent Ray, who's an expert on climate psychology, and a group of writers to really workshop this idea, and came to the conclusion that actually we really need to see flawed characters who care about climate and are working on climate. It's important because we need to relate to them and also find humor in their trials and travails. And but mostly we need to be able to see ourselves in them. And if we only have superheroes who care about climate, or eco-terrorists, which is another common trope, then it's hard to see yourself in those characters. So that's one of the many things that we learned and tried to encourage through the playbook.
So that's a really important point, and it comes straight out of entertainment education, actually. And Emily, I'm going to ask you to talk about this a bit, but that's the power of role modeling. That's one of the great powers of a story, is that you see a character who hopefully looks like you, dresses like you, talks like you, shares your values, or at least that you can empathize with and identify with, and is showing on the screen or in the pages of the book that they're going through, in many ways, the same exact journey that you're going through. And that's one of those really powerful ways that narrative helps us process not just the emotions, but behavior. Like, how do I actually change? How do I actually even imagine that change is possible? And so one of the other really critical themes there, and Emily, I'm hoping you can describe this a little bit, is what's called efficacy, a sense that is both individual efficacy and, even perhaps more importantly for the climate crisis, is collective efficacy. So could you just describe those important themes for us?
Yeah, so as you were saying, collective efficacy is our ability to collectively shift the world that we live in, our ability to work together as a team to actually change the world to be the way we want it to be. And role modeling does play an important social function. We learn by watching the behaviors of others. And so I think that there's a real large opportunity. I'm going to bring my colleague Frank Niepold to mind. He's the climate education coordinator at NOAA, and his perspective is that people are doing a ton of things already to improve climate mitigation and adaptation through their behavior. And we actually don't have very good visualization of a lot of that on screen. And so there's a direct mirroring versus moving. In the camp of mirroring, there's a huge opportunity for us to improve the visualization of things people are already doing, particularly by identifying and amplifying the existing positive outlier behaviors. Within any community where something is not going well, there's usually a handful of people who have figured out key behaviors for improving change for whatever that behavioral issue is. There's South Asian malnutrition campaigns that, for a population that is dealing with severe malnutrition, have I figured out a handful of key foods, like including the greens, the tops from the vegetables, as well as the roots, or including microcrustaceans in a starch-based diet to improve the nutritional outcomes. Likewise, for climate change communication, there's people in every community who have figured out versions of electrification or eating lower on the food chain. There's a ton of them. And I think one of the things that's interesting about climate change communication is that it's not one behavioral outcome, and it's not often individual behavioral outcomes, which I think becomes the topic of a lot of the NGO campaigns. I think that there's a lot of space for us figuring out creatively from each of our own perspectives and each of our places in our communities, the ways that we can participate to make our civilization better, safer, and healthier. And so I think that going back to how film can help improve those visualizations, one thing that we can do is show the character roles collectively building across lots of different characters and types, because I think that sometimes people get stuck trying to solve everything all at once as an individual. And I think that it can actually reduce anxiety to show many different perspectives, different socioeconomic groups, different physical locations, to show the many different kind of ways to improve the mirroring that we have. And so I think that helps sometimes reduce anxiety, because you can focus on the thing that you're doing in your community to help improve outcomes. You can see how that ties in with the many roles that other people are also playing.
Yeah, and just a selfish plug here, I would encourage people who see this in action, especially the mirroring function she's talking about. Our own Yale Climate Connections has a national radio program where every day we produce a brand new, very short story, 1.5 minutes long, that plays on over 700 stations across the country. And the point of those is that each one of them is highlighting the voice of someone just like all of us, all the diversity of America, who are experiencing the impacts of climate change right here, right now, and it's affecting the people and the places and things that we care about, not just environmentalists, but moms, grandparents, business people, Republicans, liberals of all types. But even more importantly, to Emily's really important point, is people who are demonstrating that they are rolling up their sleeves and taking action to solve this issue within their sphere of influence, whatever that is. And that is, we know from all the research that that's an incredibly important thing for people to see, is that you don't have to be an environmentalist, you don't have to be a superhero to actually solve climate change. In fact, we all have superpowers within our own sphere of influence. So how do you role model that for people and say, you actually can be part of the solution too? All right, so with that, let's turn to audience questions. I think we have some microphones, yes, there. And so if you have a question, please raise your hand.
Me? Okay. I really enjoyed the clips I saw. I haven't seen the whole series yet.
Where are we?
Sorry, can you hear me?
No, there we are, there you are.
Oh, okay, I'm right here. Yeah.
There you are, thank you.
Yes, I enjoyed those clips I saw. I haven't seen the series yet. What I saw, and this isn't necessarily a criticism, but it looked quite sort of stylish and chic in a way. And I think, climate change is also going to be messy. I'm wondering if you could speak to that creative choice, if it indeed was one, or perhaps is that not representative of the series?
Sure. I mean, we definitely have people who are dirty, like even the Rebecca Shearer character, when you see her in episode 1, she's very dirty and sweaty and kind of gross and running through the woods. So I do think, I think we have a number of different tones and we have characters of a number of different backgrounds. And so there are a number of different looks. I think there are certainly people who are, stylish and well put together and, very, very done. And so we're in the family Seder. I mean, they're all doing quite well. Everybody has a blow dryer, they're fine. We have an episode that's 2 guys who make a living driving trucks in India. They do not have super styled hair and, super snazzy dry cleaned clothes. So it really is episode to episode. We tried to as best we could. We did not get everybody, you know, it's a big planet. We did not get every single perspective, but we tried to cover a number of different types of people in an attempt to highlight the universality of climate change. Because I think there is actually a communications challenge around saying, this is not something that's going to affect everybody in the exact same way, but this is something that's going to affect everybody. And we did want to make it feel personal to all kinds of people, while also being cognizant of the differences in the way that it will affect people.
Other questions?
Hi, thank you guys very much for this talk. It's excellent to see. My name is Maggie Hart. I am a public health student in the social behavioral sciences and climate change and health. And so given just what you're talking about accessibility between the different groups who will be impacted, I'm curious why, given this importance of the topic, why Apple TV was the chosen platform because of the paywall. And I'm sure several of us are here because we get free access for 3 months, but
I mean, because they said yes. Like, I mean, Apple, like we went with Apple because Apple wanted to make the show. And I think Apple has its own reasons for wanting to make the show. You know, I think it's trying to get a sense of its, you know, it's trying to build its TV identity. And, you know, I think it has its own climate goals that it wants to reach as a company. So I think this, you know, I think from its perspective, this helped to shine light on them. I mean, if you can get me a show on CBS, God bless, like I would love to have, you know, I think there should be a climate show on every channel. And I think that's a really valid point that like, this is a fancy, you know, type situation. It is something that you have to pay for. So I very much hope that this is not the only climate show and that there are shows. I think there should be climate in reality TV. I think there should be climate in, you know, sitcoms. I think it should be everywhere. And I definitely don't think, and I would hope that people don't take away in the same way that like a disaster movie shouldn't mean that all climate shows are disaster movies. Like an Apple TV show, whatever that is, shouldn't mean that all climate TV shows are Apple TV. Like, please, you know, I would love to do a climate multicam.
And I'd also just say that I often see this, there's some of the critique around Don't Look Up, which, you know, was hugely successful, like one of the most successful movies ever on Netflix globally. And yet clearly was pitched and appealed to a certain audience and, you know, definitely did not appeal to another kind of audience out there. And people would say, well, you know, you're not reaching everybody. Well, this issue is way too big. Like nobody's going to produce the one story that's going to do this. Like if it was that easy, we would have solved this many, many, many years ago. So it's going to take a multitude of stories. And I think one of the key things is success breeds success. I mean, Don't Look Up definitely got Hollywood's attention to say, actually, you could make a lot of money telling a story and you're not scaring people off. They're actually willing to tune into this.
Yeah, I mean, TV companies are publicly traded entities. Like they're doing this because they think they can, you know, make money off of that.
Yeah. Okay, let's see, other questions. Oh, yes, thank you. Oh, sorry, who was it? Anna?
Oh, I think Emily had her hand up first.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I couldn't see it. Go ahead, Emily.
Well, no, I think this is a really good point. I think that's one of the challenges in science communication is getting all of the content made. I mean, when we make entertainment education content in, you know, other countries, it's easy to go in and literally pay to make the show and air it. I think that's harder in the US for all the reasons that Dorothy is talking about. And I think that us coming up with, you know, national strategy for climate change communication that designs and supports the content creators to get content out to all of the different groups through all of the different platforms is one of the aspiring goals of the team that, you know, we're all a part of. I think that, you know, I hope we get there eventually.
Yeah, and this, of course, is what Anna is trying to do, is to support the larger creative community to weave climate change into all kinds of stories. Anna, you want to say a little bit more about what you're seeing out there in the community?
Yeah, I would just jumping off what you guys are saying, it really has to be like the way that we describe it is we're not asking people to write a new kind of story or a different kind of genre. we're just asking people to write stories about what it feels like to be alive right now and what the world is going to look like in the next 100 years. And that, I mean, there's literally billions of possible climate stories because all of us are experiencing climate change, and it should be a huge array. Like, I want to see a Hallmark movie that talks about climate. Like, it should, I think we've just got to go for all of it. But I think that what Dorothy was saying about, like, this industry is a business, you know, somebody told me early on that like every movie that gets made is a miracle, like just all of the different factors that have to come together. It's really quite miraculous. And the fact that y'all made this show is a miracle. But I do think that's why, as an organization, like, obviously climate is the main goal that we are doing this work, but also we very are clear that we are very story first. Like, it has to be entertaining or artful. It has to be a good story, because if it's not, it's also bad for climate change. Like, climate, you know, audiences can feel when they're being preached at. There's this like metaphor that everyone seems to use, that like you have to hide the broccoli in the chocolate. And I'm like, I hate that metaphor, because I just think we need to be making like chocolate. Like, we should just be making great chocolate, because you can make great stories about climate change. It doesn't have to be this like secret infiltration. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I love the idea of a Hallmark movie, because I feel like you could have like a ski resort that's falling on hard times because there's no more snow. And then like the daughter has to come back home to her hometown because like the ski resort is failing, but then she runs into her high school boyfriend. Like, you could totally do it.
And let's not even talk about extreme home makeover, where you make over your home as a purely electrified home.
Absolutely.
Like, and your life is improved in that, right? It's just written for television. Yeah. So, all right, other questions?
Hi, my name is also Maggie. Hi, Maggie. I kind of wanted to get deeper into this discussion about how, what are the sort of, for lack of a better term, like inside baseball about how Hollywood has, in this instance of Apple TV, has said yes to this show. And specifically, I mean, we've mentioned the points of like really demonstrating that there is a market there and there is money to be made is one point. And the sort of the challenge of like, maybe that market is a siloed market, you know, and it's like, there's the contention of, you know, we want to access all these other players, or not, maybe not players, but people to change their opinions perhaps about climate. So, I mean, in your experience, when you were trying to, it seems like you've been thinking about climate and how it can play a role in your career for a long time. That must have been incredibly frustrating. And I want to hear about like, what were those tipping points or like moments in the room that people started to listen to you? And was it really because they were able to, there was a demonstration of there was a market there, and it's really just the profitability of this type of story? Or was it that those stakeholders that have, you know, maybe more power to just select those types of stories that also get to be told, their minds also changed perhaps because of, you know, the increase in articles that we're seeing about climate? Or if you could talk about the ecosystem of influence that changed that.
Totally. I mean, I think some of it is just right place, right time, and luck. Like, I just happened to get a job on The Handmaid's Tale, and my boss happened to sort of ask the question of, what is the environmental crisis of 2016? Like that, I was 85% of the way there. You know, once we're having that conversation, then to be like, I think there should be climate change is like not a hard pitch. So, you know, the ways in which it has gone well for me have often been ways in which like all the other dominoes have kind of been stacked in a line. The harder times are when it's something that it's not anywhere close to the person's original vision. And I'm trying to be like, and climate change. And like, you know, sort of, it's just, and I think, and maybe it would be different now, you know, that's, those anecdotes are now, you know, almost 10 years old, and maybe it would be different because of things like Don't Look Up. But I think at the time, there really was a fear of that's political. You know, it's like climate change is it's a political thing. Like, we don't want to be political. So let's not talk about it because it's politically controversial. And we don't, you know, or we only have so many, you know, times we can do politically controversial things, and we just had a gay character. So we can't have climate change and a gay character. Like, that's too much. Like, you have to pick. Like, and I do think there's sort of a feeling like that of like, you can do some number of things, but you can't do all the things, which is ridiculous, but but I think there are some models, I think there's constantly a fear within Hollywood, right? And part of the fear is that they'll go too far and screw up, but there's also a fear that they'll be behind. And I think, the biggest advice that I have for storytellers who are trying to get climate stories across is try to mobilize executives' fear in your favor. And try to say, like, this is what's happening. This is the new thing. Don't you want to be like the first cool new kid on the block who's talking about the thing that everyone else is going to be talking about, and try to see the world from their perspective, and then try to say, like, this will make you look cool. You'll have like the new sneakers first. Everyone else is going to be thinking about it, but it's hard. It's not like the easiest thing in the world.
And there's a really important point of social change there, is that we often know where we want to be. And so we say, how can we get there now?
Yeah.
As opposed to recognizing that change happens step by step. Okay. And that, to use a metaphor, you don't want to get too far over your skis. Okay. If you try to go too far before the ecosystem or before the people are ready, they're probably not going to do it. They'll say, oh, no, I'm not doing that. But if you can say, actually, you can just do it this little bit more, it's amazing how fast you can move once people start doing that, especially when they see that other people are doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it becomes a herd mentality.
Yeah. The best time to make a climate show is after a successful climate show.
So get out there.
Yeah. Please.
All right. Can we get a question from the?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yes, Anna.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to jump off of that. The most successful narrative that we've used to convince creative executives and other decision makers and writers that they should be incorporating climate is actually using one of Dorothy's quotes, which is, if your story doesn't include climate change, it's science fiction, and just really emphasizing that, like, even now, but especially in 5 years or 10 years, if you're not acknowledging climate change in the world of your story, then it's going to feel like flip phones. Like, it's just going to be so divorced from people's lived experience that it's going to feel outdated. And so making that argument has been the most effective argument we've used to really encourage people to step up and start incorporating it.
That's great. Could we get a question from the online audience?
Yes. So Claire, a guest who's a professional in climate communications, is wondering about the audience and reach from a social interest standpoint. Do you have viewership data yet? And will there be a way to know if we are preaching to the choir or reaching people outside of the climate science and climate change aware groups to create even greater action for our future?
That's a great question. I don't have any idea about who's watching that. I don't know if and when that will be shared. I feel like streamers are notoriously tight-lipped about their data. I think there are ways you can kind of try to sort of figure out roughly what the numbers are, but I don't know what that is yet. And I don't know if there's a way to know who it is. Even if we, if 12 people are watching, I don't know if we can figure out who those 12 are. So I don't know the answer. I would love to be able to know more, though, because it does feel important. Lindsay,
Emily.
do you know?
No, I don't know, but I want to say again, it's a really great question. And I think it's a really important one as we start to work collaboratively between research and, content producers, because I feel like as a team, it's more effective for us to communicate and learn about what is effective and who's doing what. It helps us build each next set of content as we're able. And so I think that those partnerships are really important, both at formative and summative stages. So thanks for the question.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. We don't have the data of who's watching on the streaming platform, but we are very grateful to be partnering with the Yale Center, Hollywood Health and Society, and our friend Anna Jane at Good Energy to do a big research project around extrapolations to be able to see who's watching it, how it impacted them, what behavior shifts they might have had, what actions they might have taken. So that's something that's important to us on the impact side. And we will be doing that for a long time to come.
And I'd just like to make one broader point about this related to social change, and that is, and I've never been totally comfortable with this metaphor of preaching to the choir, But if we're going to use it, it's a really important thing to do.
Yeah, choirs need preaching too.
Choirs are the people who show up and practice at the church and learn how to sing together at the hymnal for the rest of the church. And then there's the people that come maybe once a week, and then there's the people that come once a month or during weddings and funerals. You need all of them, okay? But in particular, you need the choir. So any Hollywood people that are listening here, it is okay to communicate directly to the people who are already alarmed about climate change, because guess what? They need communication too. The one thing we know about the alarmed is that they're alarmed about climate change. They don't know what to do.
Yeah.
They don't know what I can do as an individual, what we can do as a community, what we can do as a city, a nation, or the world. And that is one of the great things that narrative can do, is to help us show not just people taking action, but building the world we actually want to live in. Not the dystopia we're trying to avoid, but the world we actually want to live in.
Yeah, and that I think is our real hope, is that this is something that makes people feel less alone. You know, my experience working on it is that I felt less alone every day because I got to go in and be a part of a team that was working to make something. And I think the more that it can make people reach out, talk to someone, you know, TV is something you can watch with your friends. You can watch it collectively, you can have popcorn. You know, and we have there's a website that we advertise at the end of every episode where people can go if they want to just learn more about the science or find, you know, different groups that they can connect with to take action. But also, I mean, there's so many ways people, like, you don't need our website. I mean, please go to our website, but you don't need our website. Like, you can, you know, if you want to Google it or find out in your own neighborhood, the most important thing is people finding ways that feel sustainable and important to them. So it has to feel like a genuine, you know, thing that they believe in, that they're interested in, and then they'll show up. But yeah, I think this idea of collective action, that we support each other, we're not alone and we're not disempowered.
Yeah. And in particular, that these are not just individual characters going through these stories.
Yeah.
They are part of friendships and families and communities, and that's what we actually have to do. We have to work together as people to actually address this issue. So I think that's the perfect place to end. Please join me in thanking all of our panelists. And it wouldn't be a great School of the Environment event without food. So I believe there is food outside for those who.
I just want to say real quick, thank you so much to Tony, to Dorothy, Emily, Anna Jane. Thanks for coming. Before we all head out, I just want to really quick say tomorrow at 320 York Street, we're going to have our next event, which is Resilience in Action, Stories of Conservation and Resistance in Latin America. And there'll be 2 films there. Again, find more information outside. But I thought this was a great discussion. Clearly what Dorothy and her colleagues are doing with Extrapolations is something new. And I think that the discussion today showed that. So thanks so much for coming. And if you haven't gotten, scan the QR code out there to get access to Apple TV to check out Extrapolations, you can do so. And we'll be sending more information about Yale Center for Environmental Communications spring speaker series to everyone who came. So anyway, thanks so much for coming. Enjoy the food.